What's up, Jets fans? Welcome to the latest edition of Jets Latest, where you get the latest on the Jets, Jets. I'm your host, the spitting statistician, Dane Martinez, and today we continue to talk about the new regime, the new culture, what is happening in a very exciting time for the green and white. And to be quite honest, we don't talk about special teams a lot here on Jets Latest, but we start with special teams. Why? Because it is now yet another example of how the culture is completely changing and how this new vision for the club is really absolutely everywhere on offense, on defense, and on special teams. We first have to tip our cap to two Jets who are no longer there because the punter Thomas Morstead and the kicker Greg Zuerlein were cut or released last week by the Jets, okay? And I think, listen, Morstead was kind of middle of the road. Greg the Leg didn't have a great season, if you want to know the truth, but I think there's deeper meanings in all of this. First of all, cutting Morstead saves us about $2.5 million in cap space. All right. Cutting Greg the Leg saves us about $2.4 million in cap space. Also, if you remember, in previous episodes of Jets Latest, I talked about how there are very, very few Jets that were over 30 years old on the roster. Well, Morstead and Zuerlein were two of them. Okay. Now, literally, Tyrod Taylor is the only actual guy, except for like Hennessy, the long snapper, that is more than 30 years old on this roster. So the youth movement is continuing to be the priority here for Darren Muji, for Aaron Glenn in their new vision, their new brand here on the green and white. So the Jets will in fact have new kickers, both at punter and at place kicker in 2025. Now let's look at some of these guys. On the punting side, remember, early in free agency, the Jets signed Austin McNamara. This guy was a four-time all-conference punter at the Big 12. He was an All-American as a freshman. He had a 45.9-yard average. He had an 87-yard punt, for goodness sakes, against West Virginia. And recently, in those wave of undrafted free agents, we signed Kai Kroger out of South Carolina. He had a 76-yard punt in the Shrine Bowl. That was the longest in that bowl game in 5 years. And interestingly enough, I don't know how big of a deal this is, but Kroger also completed 7 of 10 passes in college for 205 yards and 3 touchdowns. Maybe they see him as a weapon. Maybe they're going to get a little tricky on special teams, right? Actually using that, something you have to consider if he were to be the punter. And then also as kicker. Last year, we had Anders Carlson. He had 8 of 10 field goals, but in another kind of undrafted free agent move, another SEC guy, we signed Caden Davis out of Ole Miss. And a lot of people thought that Davis was going to get drafted. I mean, he was a semifinalist for the Lou Groza Award, which goes to the best kicker in college football. So one of the best kickers in college football, to be sure. He was first team All SEC. He was first team All American. So literally, we brought in people that were literally the first team All American kickers and punters recently, okay? He made almost 97% of his extra points, almost 83% of his field goals. He hit a 57-yard field goal back in 2023. And last season, he actually broke the Ole Miss record for a number of 50-plus yard field goals in a season where he hit 4. So the leg is definitely there, right? So what I think this also means, though, is the idea of not only youth, but competition is literally something that Aaron Glenn preaches. He talks about having highly competitive, highly dedicated, kind of resilient, tough, aggressive. And that's now even in the kicking position here with the New York Jets. And I think that is the moral of the story, right? We save cap space, we get younger, and we now actually have a competition at kicker and at punters. So while we don't talk about special teams and kickoffs and punting as much here, I did wanted to make that point. And obviously that culture starts by building around our new, young, competitive, coachable with something to prove, flashing quarterback, Justin Fields. Listen to what Justin Fields recently had to say about not only Fields' development, but also his leadership, right? He is the new QB1. We are wrapping around Justin Fields. We are all in with him for the idea of not drafting a quarterback, right? High, not signing a free agent quarterback. The ideas of getting other Ohio State guys in, whether it's Josh Myers as an offensive lineman or rumors that have resurfaced around Chris Olave, the Saints wide receiver who could be on the trade block. But listen to what Aaron Glenn had to say about Justin Fields' development and his leadership. He goes, There's a quiet confidence about that man that's unshakable. Even though he's not the most vocal person, he's active with his body language and in one-on-one conversations. If he has to stand in front of the guys and say something, he will. He's not going to talk just to talk, but he says things when it needs to be said. He's a really good athlete. He works his butt off in the weight room, and he's doing everything he can to improve. He's taking every advantage given to him and running with it, so I'm very happy with where he is at. And listen, by all accounts, when you saw kind of the previous voluntary workouts and you saw the mini camps and things of that nature, a lot of people are saying that Justin Fields is coming in great shape, that his mechanics look good, kind of the arrow is pointing up. And honestly, I have been saying this for a while. Remember, I've been telling you, Justin Fields entered this league his rookie year behind the Bears offensive line with a dearth of weapons, with a 59% completion percentage. He has improved that every single year so far in the NFL, was up to around 66% last year in his starts with the Steelers. Now, he didn't qualify, but guess who was 66% last year? Sam Darnold, and that finished 17th in the NFL. That is above league average where he now is. And again, improved offensive line. We've talked about sure-handed weapons he has. Guys like Josh Reynolds, Mason Taylor not dropping the ball. The adjusted catch percentage we've talked about here on Jets Latest for guys like Breece Hall, guys like Garrett Wilson, right? So he's going to have sure-handed weapons. And of course, the dual threat nature of Justin Fields is something that will in fact scare opposing defenses. I mean, he ran for 1,142 yards back in 2022. That is the second most all time by a quarterback. Only Lamar Jackson in 2019 ran for more than that when he ran for 1,206 yards. I mean, quite frankly, only 3 quarterbacks in NFL history have ever run for 1,000 yards in a season. Michael Vick, Justin Fields, and Lamar Jackson. So, there's definitely the ability for him to grow. We are seeing that development. We are all in on Justin Fields and this youthful culture coming together. We talk about the development, the coaching here, and really trying to make Justin Fields as comfortable as possible, both with the moves they're making and with the moves they are not making, signaling confidence in the new QB1, which is clearly Justin Fields. But we also got to mix the good with the bad here. Here on Jets Latest, we are very optimistic about the culture with Muji and Glenn and how they are teaching, how they are developing, how they are building a brand. We are optimistic about the second act potential of Justin Fields. But I got to tell you the truth. You know who is not optimistic about the 2025 New York Jets? The sports books are not optimistic about the 2025 New York Jets. Look at this. They are only favored in 2 games this season. Week 7 at home against the Carolina Panthers, and Week 10 at home against the Cleveland Browns. And both of those are by less than a field goal. They're only 1.5-point favorites, only 2.5-point favorites against the Panthers and the Browns, respectively. But then when I look at it, they are underdogs by under a field goal 6 times this season. And quite frankly, I think a lot of these games are winnable. The opener against the Steelers, and the NFL has come out and said, yes, they did think that Aaron Rodgers maybe being with the Steelers had something to do with that kind of week 1 revenge game for both Fields and Rodgers. Week 5 against the Cowboys, home dogs by 1.5. Week 13 against the Falcons, home dogs by 1.5. Home game against the Dolphins, they're dogs. I think they could win that game. Home game against the Patriots, I think they can win that game. So there's a few out there that you would think they could go ahead and actually win these games, even though they are dogs. At New Orleans, they are dogs. That makes no sense to me. And then check this out. There's a couple where they are dogs by between a field goal and a touchdown that I think are outright winnable. For example, Week 15 at Jacksonville. I think that's a winnable game. The London game, potentially. A road game against New England. So when you look at that, I know we have been optimistic here, but there is also a disconnect, right? Because while the Jets are only favored 2 times this season, their win total is 5.5, right? So the books are projecting the Jets to win 5 or 6 games. I think it's going to be some more. I think it's going to be more like 7, 8, or 9, quite frankly, because Pittsburgh winnable, Dallas winnable, Atlanta winnable, New Orleans winnable. That's 4 more that they are dogs in. That could get us to 6. I think Jacksonville is winnable. And quite frankly, when you look at the ones where they are touchdown or more underdogs, I get it. These are some tough games. On the road against Tampa Bay, I understand. On the road against the Ravens, tough game. I understand there in week 12. But both times when they play the Buffalo Bills, they are dogs by 8.5 and 9.5 points. And quite frankly, we play Buffalo well. We've played Josh Allen very, very well. So if you are optimistic like me, if you think this could be a good season for the Jets, then go ahead and go over their win total at 5.5, right? And if you want to get even a little bit more frisky, they are plus 490, about 5-1 to make the playoffs. There's a universe here. If they get right, we looked at their schedule. After that tough stretch, it does kind of open up. So they are almost 5-1 to make the playoffs, and then they are 16-1 to win the division. I think Buffalo is the class of the division, but I do think the Jets will overperform right here. And quite frankly, the disconnect between only being favored 2 times all season and then the win total being 5.5 means that, they think that there's some wins out there as well, even when there are maybe just dogs by under a field goal. But that'll do it for this episode of Jets Latest. Remember, watch these videos, like these videos, subscribe to the channel, hit me up in the comments. I love engaging with the fans of the green and white as we talk 2025, which looks like it's going to be getting in on the ground floor of a new era. I really do believe the culture going even to special teams, saving money, getting younger, building competition is an under-the-radar move. So everyone sees that this regime is serious and that this is a brand regardless of who you are, what position you play. This is an organizational mindset, and that mindset is wrapped around Justin Fields and his development and his comfort level, bringing back the Ohio State guys, Garrett Wilson, and watch out for Chris Olave. He's going to be a name that is out there in trade for a while. The way they are putting these pieces together, you've heard AG talk about how intentional they are with every move they make, and I think some intentions in special teams was even seen, and you got to get in now because the books don't believe in the green and white, but eventually, if this all comes together, those numbers for some of those point spreads later on in the season, like getting 4.5 points against the Jags, that's going to change. Like getting points against the Saints, that is going to change. So that's why you're here at Jets Latest, getting the real, getting it ahead of time so you can go ahead and win your leagues and win that cash. And remember, if you want to hear more from me, the Spittin' Statistician, I am the host of the FTN Fantasy Show over on SiriusXM Channel 87, where we do more than talk about just the Jets. We talk fantasy football. We talk Major League Baseball and fantasy baseball. We talk about the NBA playoffs. And if you're a Jets fan, you may be a Knicks fan as well, and boy, is it blue and orange skies for the New York Knicks right now, right? But so much to talk about, and you can hear me on SiriusXM Channel 87, but please, go ahead. You can engage with me on Twitter or X as well, at Spittin' Speeds. I love talking to fans of the Jets, Jets. But that'll do it for this edition of Jets Latest. We will be back all week long, continuing to talk about what this organization is doing and digging into some deeper stats that I find over on FTN Fantasy about, some positives that are underlying here for the green and white. So get in now before those numbers at the sports books change. We'll see you tomorrow, everybody. This is the latest edition of Jets Latest. We out of here.